Welcome to Promo Insiders, an ASI media podcast that covers the topics that matter most to the promotional products industry. I'm CJ Mitica, and today I'm joined by Joe Favre, the Promotional Division Sales Manager for Vanguard, to talk about print, promo, and marketing collaborations. Want to be a total solutions provider instead of a product peddler? Listen up as we discuss how to become more of a one-stop shop for your clients. So we're recording this on a Friday afternoon in the summer when Joe was traveling, and Joe was like, "Hey, like, can we do this on Friday?" In an email, I said yes. In the back of my mind, I was like, "It's a Friday afternoon summer, Joe. Like, why are you making me work? Why, Joe?"
Hey, there's no better time to be in Midtown Manhattan than a steamy Friday afternoon talking to you, CJ.
Yeah, luckily for you, the weather here in Philadelphia has been very gray and dreary and actually cold. So you get off the hook this time. But if I invite you back for the next time, Joe, we're going to have to do it during the winter when the weather is not as appealing.
Fair enough.
So usually when we set up these Promo Insiders episodes, sometimes I have a defined topic in mind and look for people to talk about it. Other times, though, just say, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast? Like, what do you want to talk about?" And that was the case with Joe here. I say, "Joe, we'd love to have you on the podcast. You know, like what topics do you want to talk about? What's near and dear to your heart?" And Joe, to your credit, you gave me a bunch of different options, some really good choices. So thank you for that. And then one in particular, though, that stood out was this idea of these print, promo, and marketing collaborations. And so it's a great topic, and I think something that's is a very appealing idea for distributors in this industry. But let's first start off by saying, like, what do you mean by that? Like, when you're talking about these collabs, like, what's involved?
Well, it's interesting. I was reflecting on this, getting ready to chat with you, and I'm still being spoiled with Vanguard after about 3.5 years here, because Vanguard was a cool kid before anybody else was a cool kid, because in essence, we're a marketing agency. So we've been doing print and promo and collabs since long before I got here. And I was the original COVID hire, right? March 2020.
Wow.
So we were already well positioned for kitting fulfillment, but really, not to be dramatic about it, about storytelling. I spent 12 plus years on the distributor side. Before that, I was a supplier. But during my previous distributor stopovers, you could accuse me of slinging product. And some of my best clients told me that after I got to Vanguard, because their experience with Vanguard, not to use a trade expression, but it got a lot more experiential. So, we all were kind of forced into it with the pandemic. But again, to use that analogy, being a storyteller, we ask about the why whenever we engage. We don't want to just send you a piece of drinkware or a string bag or a backpack. What's the why? What messaging can we include with it? I mean, packaging is such low-hanging fruit and such an incredible canvas. I mean, you can tell the whole story just with the packaging, let alone things like romance cards, or in our case, we have digital assets as well. But it's a conversation with every engagement we have, that what else can we do to augment your message? Because it's one thing to get a product, but it's another thing to get the intention behind it.
So you mentioned actually a few things that I think are interesting. I want to follow up on. First, just the idea of bringing in print and bringing other marketing services in addition to your typical promotional products. Like, what are these different services that distributors can offer?
I mean, it runs the gamut with print, and quite frankly, I'm still scratching the surface. Thankfully, as a company, we're awesome at it. But I was thinking about a project we did recently that involved very elaborate custom gifting, that had specific messaging for encouraging. It's a quantitative hedge fund, and they like to encourage a bit of whimsy and gamification. So we designed a couple of very specific game pieces. One of them was pickleball, one of them was a multi-game set, but we did full wrap packaging to accompany the product that had the messaging inside and outside, and then a mailer. And in addition to that, we included a romance card with things that drove them back to a site for guidance on how to deploy these and how to gamify it within their own environment.
The romance card is an interesting term. Actually, I haven't heard it that much. What is a romance card?
That's just it's a euphemism I use just because it's a great way to bullet the story about why are you getting this. We started talking a lot during the pandemic about what we call morale gifting, because we were all stuck and getting those boxes, whether it was full of crinkle or what have you. But I mean, the experience, I said it earlier about experiential marketing, getting the product and getting the story with the product. Here's why we value you. We're thinking of you. A lot of it, you saw it, we all saw it in the industry. A lot of it was geared more towards home comfort or reminding people that we knew what was important to them when we were sending out mailings to staff. So that's just something I use just to tell the story about why you're getting this and how we hope you can deploy it, and how, sometimes it was about a separation from work. It was just a little snippet of storytelling that's a great piece and easy. It can just be dropped in a box. It can be, glue dotted to the inside lid. It can go anywhere. It can, and we've used it separately, not as a drip campaign, but to build up to that mailing.
Got it. So you've mentioned storytelling a few times. That's something that we know that we've heard from time to time, and I've heard it from other distributors. And so, like, what's the philosophy behind that term and what you're trying to accomplish with that?
Sometimes, because I'm the original promo nerd, and I've had salespeople over the years apologize to customers because I get a little too carried away and passionate. But I say, we really want to know your DNA, because we do. I don't know your culture. I only know my primary contact. If I'm lucky enough to be working with somebody in marketing, maybe it's somebody in human resources. But as deep a dive as we can take, we want to take it. What's that company philosophy look like, and how are we going to connect a piece of branded merch to your philosophy? I used to call it a physical manifestation of your brand. So in addition to the fact that it has to have some value, and it can't be, we've all heard the hideous phrases, tchotchkes, trinkets, and trash, which make me twitch. So it's got to be a valuable piece, but it's also, the messaging has to be in line with what you want to convey. We were just in an event earlier this week, and a resounding trend was sustainability again.
Yeah.
So it opens up that dialogue to customers, because they don't always think about it. So the more questions you ask, the more you understand, how they want to present themselves to their outbound client base as well as their own staff.
So what kind of questions are you asking? Like you say, we want to know your DNA. We want to know more about your company. Like, what kind of questions are you asking to get to that information?
Well, on a project basis, we're really asking how they want to deploy the project. Who's the audience? The usual suspects. Sometimes that's demographics. Sometimes it's the scope of the mailing. Demographics helps a lot. A lot of our clients, New York City agencies, they do a lot of mailings to, say, younger groups that they're trying to generate interest and buzz. Budget is part of it, but the more I can find out about how their staff engages with them, how their staff feels about their own brand, especially, obviously I'm talking about things that might be for internal use as opposed to client facing, but we don't necessarily scrub social media, but we spend a lot of time on social media to see what they're putting out into the universe and who they are. Like the company I alluded to earlier, you would think they were kind of a stodgy hedge fund, but in reality, they're pretty whimsical. They wear hoodies and they like fun, and they push us creatively on every project, which is a great challenge to have. So, and it took some time to get there with them, but it's a fun part of the mission, because it's nice to be able to be proactive without throwing stuff at the wall, that we think this is going to fit your brand. And it's something we try to do as obviously as often as possible when we're pitching concepts. If we get an outline of what they want to do, we want to connect the dots with who they're sending it to and make sure it's meaningful.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And it reminds me, like, when we talk to distributors, when we do our education, we advise them, like, you're not just trying to sell a product, right? You're trying to accomplish something. And typically, like, we've talked about, like, pain points, right? Like, find out what your customer's pain point is and then offer the solution to solve that. This feels like kind of the other side of that coin, where, yeah, sure, there's a pain point involved, or there's a goal that you're trying to accomplish, but what you're really doing is sort of identifying what does this brand represent, and then using that tangible piece of merch to embody it and put it in somebody's hand, right?
It's a perfect analogy. Sometimes when I'm feeling dramatic, I'll say, it's brand amplification, because we all have, so many people write pieces about the power of the t-shirt, which is hysterical, because I've had conversations with people over the years that, oh, let's do something different. If you do it right, it's going to resonate, and there's a power to it. And like you said, if you're continuing the message of the brand and amplifying it, we all have things in our closet or on our desk that remind us of a brand and a positive experience. And that's the most simplistic way to break it down, right? We want to give them something that their recipients are going to get, and they're not going to say, oh, they sent me that.
So I'm curious about Vanguard. So, you know, you guys have your promo division, but you also have you're I guess a full-blown marketing agency, right? With all these other services. So what does that enable you to do as the promo guy, right? That have this sort of this backing of your company and these additional things that you can offer.
By and large, the print aspect is somewhat of a game changer for me personally, that I don't have to engage outside partners, even for something which, again, I know I said it earlier, but it's almost promo 101 these days, that if you're not talking about packaging, you're failing. But those are already entrenched assets for Vanguard. Any pieces of print collateral, we have the resources for that because it's a massive piece of what we do. So those relationships are already in place. So thinking about talking to you and thinking about over the last couple of years, I call it the intersection of print and promo. We already have that. Our technological assets are great just because, like everybody else, we're on that space, whether it's inventory programs or pop-up shops, which that's a whole nother thing. But our infrastructure, for me, like I said, I got spoiled with our infrastructure because our team, the cohesion across business units is fantastic. So you said one-stop shop. We can go to our clients with basically any offering. One of the running jokes around here is, we just say, what if? Because a customer may come to you with a concept that you think could be a little bland. And then, you push the envelope and, when you hear I didn't know you did that, it's funny the first time or two, but if it happens a third time, we're really not conveying who we are. But the first couple of times, it's a lot of fun because we're like, yeah, we do that and we do it well. So soup to nuts, from the implementation all the way out to the fulfillment. That project I mentioned before, I think the final count was over 1,200 individual fulfillments for that gifting.
Mm-hmm. So where does digital fit into this? You talked about print, and print is a natural complement, and a lot of companies in this industry do both. Digital is, I know, something that companies in our industry are getting into more and more. But when you're conceiving these collaborations, figuring out how to help your clients, where does digital fit into this whole puzzle?
Well, for me personally, digital, it splits off a little bit depending on what the execution is going to be. If it's a digital marketing campaign, I mean, we do app development, we're going to launch websites. So that would be in conjunction with promo. If it's the technological piece where we're hosting sites that are aggregators like that gift I alluded to, that's all embedded in promo.
Got it. Okay. So Vanguard has all these services. That's terrific for you as an employee of Vanguard and selling Vanguard services. But as we know, a lot of distributors, they just don't have those array of capabilities, and maybe if they do, they have just one or two of those things. So if you're just a distributor, you're just building your business, you have the promo angle covered, and you want to offer these other things. What are you doing? Are you looking to outside providers? Are you making connections or alliances? How's that going to work?
And you mentioned this one to me the other day, and I thought about it a lot because, again, 3 years in at Vanguard, I love the direction our industry is headed, which is not to be this overarching statement, but as we grow, we shrink. And I grew up in the environment of, back in my supplier days, you would walk into a booth and cover your credentials and look around, and it was borderline industrial espionage. And now we're having, networking meetings with people that 5 years ago you would have called a competitor. But we're all getting so much stronger and better together. Being part of an organization like BrandChain gives us access to a whole nother universe of print, who in conjunction wants to learn about promo. So that's when I talk about the intersection, between networking groups, professional trade organizations, regionals. Those are all, for me personally, they've been amazing resources for the last couple of years, because you're always going to find people that know one space or the other, and then you've got the ones that know both that are really deploying it, which I'm happy to be part of. But we've seen so many of those in the last couple of years that just had that full suite of service, and there's always a nugget you can grab and put it in your toolbox, and we're all happy to share.
Yeah, and that's like a great point. Something that I've learned. I've been in the industry for 15 years now, and sort of new to the industry, and sort of new to the business world. My assumption was always well, just get what you can get, right? Like, you're trying to grow your business, you just want to find whatever business you can get. But as I've been in this industry more, you learn to pick your lane, to find your niche. And if it's not something that you do, it's okay to even reach out to a competitor that does it in a different way in a different industry and be like, hey, like what, you can tell your that potential client, I think these guys would be a great choice for this one. Because really, I think what goes around comes around, right? Like if you do that for somebody will do that for you. At least that in my ideal thinking. Do you find it the same way, Joe?
I couldn't agree more. It's, sometimes you view it as currency in the bank, sometimes it's karma. I love being a connector because it comes around. Sometimes it's as simple as having a great relationship with a vendor that might need more time on the calendar for production, and they're going to remember when you need something turned around quicker. But I love sharing resources. And I'm always cautious, like you say, about the person who's in the business, because the stay in your lane comment that hits home for me, because again, having been a stuff provider for years, there's a lot of caution because you don't want to get over your skis.
Yeah.
Because we don't get a lot of second chances in this business. If you're going to commit to it, you're going to have to commit to it and do it right. So as the industries evolve, we have so many resources that we can leverage. Your own educational products and events. I think as we evolve, we're going to see a broader scope of supplier slash vendor slash exhibitors that touch all aspects of the business. So we can all grow like that. Because like I said, our hand was somewhat forced with the pandemic, but it's only accelerated. It hasn't slowed down at all. So I had a working advantage coming in here, but if I had been presented to opportunities like that even 5 years ago, I would have been very leery to overcommit.
Yeah, and that's a great point. But like for distributors, you want to become that one-stop shop, and if you want to expand into something, like by all means, but do it smartly. Like commit and go all in. Don't half-ass it. And if it's a viable means of accruing revenue, and if you're not going to make that full commitment, that's where you look and see who can I talk to, who can help me.
It sounds silly, but my best client relationship in the last 10 years evolved from me saying no to a project because
Yeah.
I knew we weren't going to be able to execute. And at the time, I was working with the sales rep who really owned that relationship. And I said to him, I said, this is just not going to end well for anybody. And I'm sure they have other resources. And I want your permission to be completely transparent with them. And I was a little hesitant to do it. And they thanked me profusely. And it kind of transformed the relationship because that's always been my philosophy, for lack of a better word, is that transparency, whether it's dealing with vendors or dealing with clients. The more you know, the better off you are. Some clients don't want to get in the weeds with you about production processes or what have you, but a lot of them do. And it's served me well. And like you said, to share that information across the aisle is just, we're all better.
So you touched on this a little bit. I think it's a good segue. What do distributors need to be aware of, like the stumbling blocks? It's easy to say, oh yeah, like let's bring in print, let's offer these other marketing services. Like what a great idea, easy peasy. But I'm sure it's not simple. Like what do distributors need to be aware of?
Well, thank God I don't have any cautionary tales from my own experience. But I mean, I guess it is easy, to run and gun, but having access to some, like I said earlier, so much education, um, pump the brakes. Pump the brakes because I mean, it's a lot harder to win a client back if something goes sideways. And again, like I said, to have that transparent conversation that maybe there's someone else, in your network that you can connect them with for that piece, or maybe it's just a question of doing some recon. But I learned a long time ago not to put the old foot in the mouth about committing to someone. One of my guys used to say, "Well, promise them everything and disappoint them later." No, doesn't work that way. So there's so many assets in our industry now to get better, even just to get comfortable, so you can make those commitments without figuring out after you've made the commitment. I think that's the kiss of death.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great advice. So I want to wrap up, Joe, and just by taking like a big picture view, because I think it actually ties into this topic that you suggested. You've been in the industry, so how long now? How long have you been in this industry?
30 years.
Well, so you got me beat, but so you've got the perspective here. You've seen the evolution of this industry, and especially in the last few years. What's been one of the big changes, and what gets you excited about how this industry is evolving, especially right now?
This particular topic gets me excited, maybe because it's the universe that I really live in every day.
Yeah.
But overall, reflecting on the way the industry shifted in the last couple of years, I alluded to transparency before. having been a supplier years ago, I mean, technology was different then, but I feel like I don't want to say those relationships are broken, but they were kind of fragmented, a lot of them. And having spent time on both sides of the fence, the communication flow was so critical. And when there were breakdowns there, it damaged so many relationships, it erodes trust. I mean, I'm speaking in obvious generalities, but again, I wasn't trying to deal with the pandemic to find silver linings, but in the middle of it, that was one that I thought about a lot because I heard so many supplier partners, and that's how I think of them. I don't think of them as vendors because having spent time in those trenches, I understand the challenges, and the challenges were only exacerbated. But that information sharing was critical, and once we got over some really ugly hurdles with supply chain and nobody wanted to hear it, and the more we all shared, the better we all got. So it's not like I've interviewed 10 CEOs of suppliers, but the ones I chat with occasionally, we all feel like we're in a better place. Like it hasn't been this dramatic sea change in our relationships, but I think they've improved. There's a reason we call them trusted partners.
Yeah, it's funny how any topic you broach in this industry, all roads lead back to relationships, right? It all boils down to relationships.
Yeah, I mean, when I was alluding to trust at one point talking to somebody, I must have said I was transparent to a fault or something like that. I might have even said blunt. And the person I was talking to said, "So you're saying you're a New Yorker?" I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Like, I'm an information sharer until you tell me to stop. I want you to understand my process, and that way I'll understand yours." And it does. Relationships, trust, it's the backbone of so many things. But in this industry, I always say when you try to explain our industry to a civilian, it's kind of funny. But at the end of the day, we live and die by our promises and our deadlines and our commitments.
Well, Joe, this was great information. I hope that distributors can take away this notion of not just relying on product, bringing in these other services, thinking about that collaboration to elevate your offering. So, Joe, thank you again for joining us today.
I can't thank you enough for inviting me, CJ. It was a blast.
Great, thank you, and thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your week.